Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse, and in this recording I'm going to be exploring the astrology of February 2026. So it is actually the 13th of January as I'm recording this, and literally as I pressed play, some alarm has started somewhere. I'm hoping that you guys won't hear it because I can do some AI wizardry, some sound treatment that will hopefully strip out this very annoying sound. But it is an alarm, and I just thought, that actually is quite descriptive of the astrology that is at play. It's wanting us to pay attention. It's noisy. It's not something that we can really easily ignore, and nor would we want to, because when there is an alarm sounding, it's something that we need to pay attention to. And that is because this month is packed full of astrological action. This is one of the months this year that we have all been talking about as astrologers. We've got Saturn changing signs. We've got the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune, which has been building and building and building and building up a lot of expectation about what that might be about. And then we've got eclipse season, and we've got Uranus stationing, Sedna stationing, and just as an extra final flourish, we also have Mercury retrograde to deal with as well. That is more towards the end of the month, but we will be kicking into gear with the shadow periods quite early on in the month. So you could say that it's busy, and we begin on the 1st of February. This is Imbolc in the old pagan calendar, the first stirrings. Imbolc means in the belly, and it is connected to the idea of the first stirrings of spring. And on this very sacred date, we are going to have a full moon in Leo. It's at 13 degrees and 3 minutes of the sign Leo. And once again, it is a supercharged, super dynamic lunation because it is going to kick off all the planets that are currently hanging out in Aquarius. We've gone from last month's big pile-up in Capricorn to now another big pile-up now in Aquarius. Pluto, Mars, Vesta, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, all of them in Aquarius, and all of them in an opposition to this lunation. So yes, this is supercharged, and also, of course, because it's the sign Leo, then we would anticipate that this is quite dramatic energy because Leo is associated with the theatre. It's also associated with kings and queens. I will be doing a deep dive into this chart for my patrons and Substack members. So if you would like to know more about this lunation and all lunations, as well as having a weekly forecast, and then do check out my links below. But certainly this lunation is going to pack a punch because it is going to be opposing all these planets that are in Aquarius. Everybody in opposition to some charismatic figure. The moon in Leo, as far as kind of world events, mundane astrology, speaks of public figures, people who are bright on the world stage, might sometimes literally be actors or royal families, the entertainment industry generally. And there's the idea of pride, so we might be talking about national pride as well. So all of these themes are burning very bright around this time, and because we have all of these oppositions in play, then we know that there is some kind of confrontation, and it's whether or not we can keep a cool head. I think this is important because of all of that Aquarius energy. Leo and Aquarius, they're fixed signs. So even though we associate Aquarius with being very innovative and progressive and all these kind of interesting words, it can also be enormously stubborn as well. So this is what we might be dealing with some kind of very stubborn position that people are taking that is causing this conflict. And I want to sort of say a conflict of interests as well. The next major movement is that Uranus will station direct. So Uranus, the modern ruler of Aquarius, will station direct on the 4th of February. And that in itself can bring some instability around our resources, banking systems, the stock markets, anything to do with investments, monies generally. It's also agriculture, food, because food is a resource. So things are turning around in our own Taurus house. And remember, this is going to be the last time pretty much for all of us that we will see Uranus stationing direct in Taurus, because Uranus is going to be leaving Taurus and moving into Gemini soon. So again, we're dealing with the last teachings of Uranus in Taurus, which is to create space for new growth in some way, shape, or form, some kind of new resource, some kind of new value. Something else that's more important is taking over here. And so we might feel a bit of anxiety as Uranus stations, because we know now that progress is happening one way or another. We're going to have to make room for this upgrade, for this change, for this disruption. We have to make room for it, because in some way it's going to help us to be more secure in the future. On the 6th of February, Mercury will enter Pisces, starting to break down this mass of Aquarius energy. And this is an important movement because Mercury is going to spend an extra long time in Pisces because of an upcoming retrograde. So Mercury is going to be in Pisces right up until the 15th of April. I will be writing a post over on my Substack. Again, the link is below. So I will be talking a lot more about this retrograde period. But generally speaking, we know then that there's going to be, as far as the mundane world is concerned, perhaps a lot of conversations behind the scenes. Pisces is connected to sort of the invisible worlds. So a feeling that there's a lot of conversation going on that maybe we're not privy to. Also, Mercury in Pisces generally can be a lot more emotional thinking. For all of us on a personal level, generally when Mercury goes into Pisces, it gives us the opportunity to verbalize what we're feeling deep down, to have compassionate and kind conversations. Empathy is a beautiful expression of Mercury in Pisces. But a more shadowy expression is when we don't volunteer what's actually going on, or we gloss over things, or we make them sound a little nicer than they are. Venus is also going into Pisces. This is on the 10th of February. Venus is exalted in Pisces, so she enjoys being here because it's a place of unconditional love. So again, these are beautiful kinds of influences, very soft, very sensitive, but also sometimes Venus in Pisces can sort of see what it wants to see. Again, that idea of fantasy, because Pisces is ruled by Neptune. So we get this very sweet energy, but because we're so focused on wanting to love everybody and love everything, then we can sort of look past where there's obviously some kind of issue, problem, or just something that we don't like. So we need to be aware of this. And as Mercury goes into the shadow on the 11th of February, we are going to come back this way to revisit any decisions or any conversations or any ideas that we come up with around this time. So it is important to try and be as straight as we can with ourselves, with each other, whilst we have this very strong Pisces energy coming in, because otherwise, we could get very muddled. And this is the classic symptom of Mercury in Pisces. Everything gets very muddled up because we're also very open to the thoughts and feelings of other people. It's all the messages that are in the ether. It can be spiritual communication as well. It's a beautiful time for sort of listening to our dreams and meditation practice, or using oracles, tarot cards. All these kinds of things is a lovely expression of Mercury and also Venus going through this sign. But the lack of clarity may be an issue. 12th of February is when Sedna will station direct. This is something that is much more in the background, I think, unless it's actually sitting on your sun or moon or one of your personal planets or angles. It's unlikely that we feel it specifically on a personal level, because this is such a slow moving body. It's much more to do with our collective experience. But because Sedna is stationing, it draws our attention, and Sedna is just asking us to check in with how we're communicating with one another, because Sedna is now in Gemini. And she speaks of the evolution of consciousness. And the words that are being spoken to me now as I'm talking about it is, what do you think now? That might be the question to ask. What do you think now? Says Sedna. She's asking us to check in with what we've learned so far and how we're perceiving things. And then Saturn finally enters Aries on the 14th of February. So now the big stories are really starting to come into play. This is what we've been waiting for, because of course, as soon as Saturn moves into Aries, then it's already in a conjunction to Neptune. They are both sat on that 0 degrees of Aries, the Aries point, the first degree of the entire zodiac. It is enormously animated. The actual conjunction between Saturn and Neptune is on the 20th of February. So this is going to just inform the entire month, and is, I imagine, going to be the aspect of the year, because Saturn and Neptune coming together on this 0 degrees of Aries, this is the seed point. This is the building, Saturn, of a new ideology, which is Neptune. It is taking what's in our imagination, which is Neptune, and manifesting it, bringing it down to Earth. Now, the interesting thing is that these two planets have very different opposing qualities. Saturn is all about reality and structure and authority and doing things in a business-like, very sensible way. Whereas Neptune is very spiritual. It speaks of transcendence. It speaks of flow. It's the ruler of the oceans and water. So we have the water and we have the container, Saturn, the water and the container. And so we start to get the idea then that there is the possibility for shaping an entire new reality, because on 0 Aries, we are beginning again. We are starting again. We are starting again as a planet, as a human race. We are at the beginning point. And given the fact that Western astrology is associated with the movements of the Northern Hemisphere, 0 Aries is when we reach spring. When the sun crosses this point, that tells us we are now in springtime. So it has that spring energy to it. Aries, of course, is fiery, and it is the first of fire. So this is the first spark leaping in the same way as we think of the lambs that are leaping around the field. So we have this incredible energy that's bringing in all this incredible potential, and yet it also has the potential to be incredibly confusing, because Neptune has the ability to dissolve or erode or sometimes deflect, to cloud. There's a sense that our individual perspective on what reality is going to play a much bigger part. How we see reality personally is going to govern how we shape this new reality of Saturn conjunct Neptune. In my previous recording, I think it was the one for the entire year ahead, the 2026 overview. I think it was that one anyway. I spoke somewhere about how Saturn conjunct Neptune was also about mastering Saturn, our imagination, because when our imagination runs away with us, then that alters the world that we are manifesting. And I'm not speaking in kind of magical woo-woo terms here. I'm speaking in very realistic terms, because how we see the world will dictate how we engage with the world, the goals that we have, the things that we're trying to do, the way we interact with other people. It's going to govern everything. So this is why we need to master our imagination, to find a vision that we can hold on to find meaning. I kind of feel that some of the shadow expression of Saturn conjunct Neptune might be wrapped up in a sense of a loss of meaning in some ways. Mostly because Neptune's been hanging out on that final degree of Pisces, and Neptune in Pisces, those years have been very fanciful and very wishful and wistful and quite dreamy. And I think, Saturn conjunct Neptune is going to be a bit of a sort of coming back to earth with a bump moment for a lot of us, because it's almost like all the lies, all the gaslighting, all the fog has drifted away, and we're seeing things as they are. But just as that moment comes, then Neptune comes back in and says, but we could imagine something different. And yes, we can imagine something different. We can imagine a beautiful, meaningful, visionary new world. But it has to be something that is realistic and possible. And so there's so many clashing influences that are coming together as we get these two clashing influences coming together. Now, Saturn conjunct Neptune is going to last pretty much the entire year. So basically, the two of them are going to be traveling close enough together to be in a conjunction with one another. We just get a period between the 15th of May and the 25th of September when they're not actually together. But we'll then have the 25th of September through to the 12th of January 2027, where we'll still have this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in play. Generally speaking, when Saturn changes signs, so if we just look at Saturn alone for a moment, it tells us that there is going to be a trial of some kind here, because the purpose is that we need to master something here. That is what Saturn is always about. He shows us where we have limited ourselves too much, where we need some maturing, and therefore we often feel a little bit uncomfortable because we're having to go out of our comfort zone to mature. And so Saturn can feel like problems, troubles, difficulties, but really he's just saying, look, you can get it together here in a much better way. And once I leave this part of your chart, you're going to feel so much better. So that's the kind of personal experience of Saturn. Saturn in Aries is saying you need to master your energy. You need to know what your strengths are. You need to take personal responsibility. This is a time of personal accountability. You need to know that you can lean on yourself. It doesn't mean that we can't rely on anyone else, but we do need to know that we can rely on ourselves when push comes to shove. It's a very different quality to all of this Pisces stuff that we've had, obviously for the last 2.5 years while Saturn was in Pisces, but sort of longer whilst Neptune was in Pisces. Like I was saying earlier, that was a time of of a lot of wishfulness and very soft and sensitive. And I think I said somewhere else, we're not going to be getting the trigger warnings with Saturn in Aries, because Saturn in Aries is you need to get strong and not be triggered by those things. And I know that's very, very challenging. I have a lifelong journey of this with my natal Saturn in Aries. So it's much easier to talk about than to do. But these are the kinds of themes that we're working with. It's giving us agency in many, many ways. But often it's a struggle to try and find that sense of personal agency, personal authority, which Saturn in Aries is about. Now, if that wasn't enough to be occupying your attention, we are going to be moving into eclipse season. So this is going to be a solar eclipse in Aquarius on the 17th of February. And this eclipse will be at 28 degrees and 49 minutes of the sign Aquarius. And so we know then that this is an important lunation because it's an eclipse. And it is going to be connected to Aquarius themes, which are associated with technology, politics, groups of peoples, futurism. I must admit that my first thought as I just started talking about this was connected to the idea of technology, because when we have a solar eclipse, the light of the sun goes out. That's what it appears to be as the moon passes over the face of the sun, blocking the light of the sun. And suddenly I found myself thinking about how this could be like turn it off and turn it on again kind of energy when it comes to technology. So it might be that there are some big technological shifts happening around this time, or some big problem. There's been a lot of issues with people trying to cut cables, of course, hacking and all this kind of thing. So I think the solar eclipse in Aquarius could possibly throw a little bit of a spanner in the works as far as sort of mundane astrology is concerned. In our own personal chart, it might be that it's just showing us something that we didn't see before. But if there is some kind of new start in the part of life, wherever this eclipse is happening in your own chart, if there's a new start here, there's very often something that we don't see initially. So that's just something to be aware of. So for example, Aquarius can be associated with friendships and groups. So maybe you find a new friend, join a new group. I'm using a very basic example here to give you a flavor of how these eclipses can work. But later down the line, you find out something about that group or that person that might change or alter your opinion or alter your connection in some way, something that you didn't know. It might also be a pleasant surprise, something that is very different that you didn't realize. Difference is associated with Aquarius energy as well. Certainly there is an idea that perspectives are shifting when we have a solar eclipse in Aquarius. And it could also mean that there is some kind of restart on a political level as well. I'm not quite sure what that's about, but let's see how that works. I'm also just noticing actually that Venus is going to conjoin the North Node on the same day as the solar eclipse in Aquarius. Now, Venus can actually represent a female figure. So maybe there is some kind of important female figure that is kind of governing the way this is going. It's a North Node eclipse, and the North Node is associated with how things are unfolding, and it points the way to go. So it's almost like go towards this woman, this figure, this important female figure. I'm not sure what this is about, but we'll see how things evolve going forwards. But it just feels very significant. Also, Venus conjunct the North Node generally is kind of let's follow the path of love. On the 18th of February, the Sun will also then move into Pisces, bringing us to Pisces season. Generally, this is a time where we're asked to retreat and rest and allow ourselves some time to process everything that's been happening. Because this is the last sign of the zodiac, and therefore the sun has traveled all the way around the charts. This is the last month of the astrological year, as I said earlier, when the sun goes into Aries, that kicks off an entire new cycle. So now we are in the place where we need to process everything that's occurred so far. And yes, sometimes we can feel a little more tired, a little more vulnerable when the sun goes into Pisces, but it does just provide us an opportunity to gather our thoughts and, give ourselves some space just to reconnect with what's going on inside. Pisces is also a water sign, so it's associated with our feelings, particularly what's going on deep in the unconscious. So we need a little time to drift and dream. Now, I'm not quite sure how much opportunity there will be to do that. Maybe we need to be intentional with that because, of course, we are going to be having all of this major activity. The sun goes into Pisces 18th of February, and then that conjunction between Saturn and Neptune happens on the 20th of February. And by the way, Saturn conjunct Neptune will also form a sextile to Sedna. Both of them will form a sextile to Sedna on the same day within 6 minutes of the conjunction. So Sedna is being brought into this story of Saturn conjunct Neptune. And so Sedna, as I was saying before, is associated with the evolution of consciousness because she's in Gemini. Gemini is about how we think and how we communicate with one another. It's connected to information and schooling, facts and figures, our ability to talk, to communicate in all ways. This is changing with Sedna, evolving into something that is going to be very, very different. If you think about Sedna's story, she started off as a woman and ended up as a sea goddess. That transformation process came from a very difficult situation. Her father betrayed her just because he was trying to save himself. He didn't want the boat to sink because there was monsters chasing after them, and he didn't want the boat to sink, so he just pushed his daughter overboard and then cut off her hands to ensure that she couldn't get back in. So poor Sedna sunk down to the bottom of the ocean, but then went through this transformation. So yes, sometimes we can go through difficult circumstances. Again, I'm talking much more on a collective level because Sedna has an 11,000-year orbit, so it is extremely slow moving. But sometimes we can go through very difficult situations where we lose some kind of aspect of ourselves, or I'm just suddenly thinking about we lose our handle on things, the fact that he cut her fingers off. So we're maybe losing our grip on some aspects of life. Of course, with Sedna forming trines up there to Pluto, with Uranus soon to do the same across these air signs that are associated with technology and innovation. Of course, I am thinking about whether we are losing our grip on these advancements and whether that's something we are going to have to grapple with. But that is sure to change us. And that's what Sedna is telling us. And don't forget, this is a sextile between Saturn and Neptune. So even though I'm talking about some of the things that I find scary, we find scary, I'm sure we don't want to be thinking about losing our grip on these AI advancements and developments and having AI take over, or, whatever those scenarios are. I don't think it's going to be quite Terminator territory, but we are going to see changes that we can't even imagine, I think, right at this moment in time. That Saturn conjunct Neptune sextile to Sedna tells us that there is some kind of great opportunity to steer this advancement, to steer this evolution. And it is connected to what we are imagining and how we are translating that into voice, into communication, and how we're thinking about it. This is what's going to shape our future. We end the month, though, with Mars square to Uranus. So this is going to bring in some tension, or it's going to exacerbate any tensions that are already there. It is a time to watch because Mars, of course, is in Uranus's sign. So we've got a very strong story here, again, about technology, about innovation, about groups, about the idea of freedom, liberation. These themes are strongly in play. They're strongly in play as I'm talking, again, 13th of January. So at the moment, news headlines are full of what's going on in Iran. Tensions are incredibly high there. Trump has just said he's going to bring in tariffs to stop people dealing with Iran because he wants the Iranian government to stop killing the protesters. So that is all really kicking off right now. So whether it's that or whether it's other things, there is some political Aquarius heat that is happening here. So that's Mars. That is maybe shaking up the stock market. This is Uranus in Taurus. That is simply causing some instability around our security. There's something going on there that is maybe causing some anger. Again, the idea of fighting for freedom. This is Mars in Aquarius and square to Uranus. There's a lot of kind of rebellious energy that's coming here. But Mars in a tense aspect to Uranus is known to be somewhat reckless. It can also be accident prone as well. And so this is what we need to be aware of around this time. It's a little bit trigger happy. It's extremely reactive. It's ricochet kind of energy because we have that electrical quality of Uranus that's very unpredictable. So we have some kind of unpredictable action happening that is also going to tie in themes from the eclipse, the solar eclipse that we've just had, because Mars will be at 27 degrees of Aquarius. The eclipse was at 28 degrees of Aquarius. So 1st of March is when Mars actually lands on the eclipse degree. And so when Mars lands on an eclipse degree, it activates it. It brings it to life. It brings the promise of that eclipse to life. So in other words, we have a solar eclipse on the 17th of February, and very quickly we see the results of that. Personally, we'll see that in our own charts, but also collectively with a lot more of the tension here. I think, again, the personal side of things is something occurs that is very quick and it suddenly changes our perspective. This is the Uranus element coming in. But on the world stage, it just makes me feel that things are a little heated and maybe there's some sense of an unexpected fight or an unexpected reaction that we need to watch for. The main thing always with Mars square to Uranus is just to simply watch what we're doing, be aware of this very unpredictable energy in play, and try to temper our reactions to things because Mars is highly strong. The best of Mars square to Uranus is that it gives us the courage to do something different. So if what we've been doing on a personal level hasn't been working, maybe now is the time to consider other ways of doing things, a new strategy, but it needs to be well thought out. Look before you leap is going to be the best advice, I think, not just to cover Mars square to Uranus, but to cover the entire month of February. It is a very astrologically animated month. There's a lot of elements at play. A lot of things are changing at this time. So take your time to process anything and remember that whatever happens, everything is still unfolding. We're not going to drop anchor at 0 Aries. This is just a beginning. It's just a foundation, and we have the power to shape this. This concludes my reading for February 2026. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please do click a like and subscribe. It always helps this channel to be more visible. Do leave a comment if you would like as well. Tell us about how you're feeling with all of these massive changes that are going on astrologically. And if you would like to hear more from me, as I mentioned before, I have Substack and Patreon and my website. All the links are below. I will see you again soon. And in the meantime, I wish you many blessings on your path.